Certain things have always bothered me, especially when it has to do with family members and showing up on a call and somebody's dead and we have to work a CPR for 40 minutes and then you have to break that news to them that, we did all we could, but they're not coming back.
This is Code 3, the Firefighters podcast, hosted by award-winning journalist Scott Orr. Now, here's Scott.
That's right, and I will not let Parkinson's stop me. Thank you for joining me today for another edition of Code 3. This is the show that gives you all the information on a firefighting topic you need in about 20 minutes. Now let's get started. We've talked several times on this show about PTSD and its effect on firefighters. It's a serious problem, one that affects nearly 40% of first responders. On this edition of Code 3, we're going to talk about a documentary that brings home the problem in a very impactful way. It's titled The Call We Carry: Confronting PTSD in the Fire Service. It's quite a good film, packing a lot into just over an hour of screen time, and it's won some prestigious film festival awards. The film was produced and directed by firefighter-paramedic Cody Shea. He's been with the Tacoma, Washington Fire Department since 2018. He had a photo and film background before he joined the fire service, and he's a second-generation firefighter. And Cody Shea joins me now. Welcome to Code 3.
Thank you for having me on.
So this documentary is clearly very timely, but what prompted you to produce it?
Well, I do still photography and videography for the department on the side, both for the social media team as well as our interdepartmental training. And I was approached about a year and a half ago by our fire chief that said, "Hey, I'd like you to do a video highlighting the services of our peer support team." Said like he'd like a 5 to 7 minute almost infomercial, just highlighting some of the services that are available to our firefighters that, for some of our new people might not understand that these resources are available, and to just do a small video highlighting those services. And then, so I started first by asking some people if they'd be willing to talk on camera, and naturally nobody wanted to talk. After a few months, someone did decide to talk to me. His name was Craig Pollock, and I think word kind of spread throughout the department that somebody of his seniority and his experience level was willing to talk to me. Others quickly followed suit, and I then interviewed Vern Porter. And after I interviewed both Craig and Vern, I realized very quickly how impactful their stories were and how much of a larger scale this story had to be. I contacted the chief and said, "Hey, this isn't going to be the story that I think many would like to see, but it's probably the story we all need to see. It's a dark story, but it's very relatable, and I think it might be impactful if you just let me have creative freedom and kind of see where it goes." And he gave me a full blessing and said, "Go for it." And then after talking to 2 people, I ended up talking to 10. And before I knew it, I had well over an hour worth of material to tell the story. And that's how it started, and that's how it kind of came to fruition.
It's filled with a lot of very personal interviews. People that you just referred to as initially being unwilling to do it and then apparently changed their mind. Let's listen to one real quick clip right now and we'll see an example of that.
It must have been like the first week or first couple weeks I was even a paramedic student. Some lady threw her little kids off the 4th floor of a building and jumped.
That's wrong. 3 DOA. Commander Steve. GG Terminal.
I've never been exposed to that. I like to ski and go fishing, and I never see anything like that. I didn't know how to process that. It was the most gnarly thing I'd ever seen. And then we go back to the station, and dudes all just go back to what they're doing. I was like, what?
Now that must be an experience that pretty much everybody has when they start out. But how did you get your colleagues to agree to open up like that on camera if they were so hesitant at first?
Well, with Craig in particular, Craig's a good friend of mine, and we were both assigned to the same station, Engine 10, and it was just one of those shifts that we worked together, and we talked long into the night about some of our struggles and things that we both have dealt with. And, I just opened up to him and I said, look, I'm really struggling finding people to talk. And he just looked at me and said, I'll talk with you, bro. I'll go on camera. And I think that one was a very good icebreaker for me in particular, because I wasn't really prepared to hear what he had to say. I wasn't prepared for the honesty. I wasn't prepared for the vulnerability.
You didn't know his story before he told it.
I knew that he had plenty of struggles and he had opened up to some of them, but when the camera came on and, we, for lack of a better term, opened the floodgates, it was really a gripping story and it captivated me. And I said very little during that interview. We started from the beginning of his career and worked on, and, the story told itself in a way. It just happened so naturally. And like I said, it was captivating to me. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, both with him and Burns' interview. And I knew that we had something drastically unique and special.
Some people might think that PTSD is a simple problem to address. You just make sure everyone has someone they can talk to, and it'll be all good.
Yeah.
But there's one story that really stood out to me in this documentary. It's the story of the guy who moved into the role of fire marshal to get a break from the trauma.
Yeah.
Let me first play this clip to set it up.
Good.
When I went down to prevention, I kind of let my guard down. I wasn't going on those calls no more. So I kind of, hey, I'm done with that side. I was burned out. I needed a break. So I went there to get that break, and it was working. The break was working great for me. But a lot of my support group in that time frame retired. They left the job. They're not here no more. Some of them have moved away. And I lost my support group. I lost my foundation.
And then he went to a fatal structure fire call that no one knew was a fatal when he started investigating.
Yes.
So here's what happened next.
Most people had already left. There was only a couple companies still on scene, and I started digging in the bathroom to figure out what I could do. And I picked up an item, thought it was a shampoo bottle. And when I looked closer, it was a head.
That's when he began to realize that PTSD counseling needs to be ongoing. It's not an okay, I'll be fine now kind of thing.
No. Yeah, that was a difficult story to hear. And it was difficult for other people to hear that were on that scene, because they felt his pain and they heard it in his voice and they saw it on his face. And several people on that scene expressed, I guess you would say, maybe even regret or sorrow that they couldn't have found it themselves. They couldn't have found those bodies themselves to at least prepare him for what he was about to find. But, that's just sometimes the way the world works. Sometimes how our job works,
Have you experienced the old school technique or lack thereof of saying, suck it up and deal with it?
I've been fortunate enough to not have a ton of experience with that. I've only been in the fire service just shy of 6 years. And before that, I was in EMS for 4 years. And, I feel like very fortunate that when something really bothered me, it really bothered me. And other people on scene, it bothered them as well, So the things that have impacted me personally, I haven't witnessed a lot of the suck it up mentality. But I'm very aware that many of my colleagues, especially those that appeared in video, have. And I feel like it's changed a lot of people. A lot of those salty firefighters that never said anything, now they say things, they open up a little more. So we've noticed change on a field level since this has come out. within our department, and we hope that it spreads to other departments as well. And not to say that we're trying to promote an atmosphere where if you see something messed up, we see horrible things every day. That's part of the job. That's never really going to go away. And not to create a veil of excuses on why we can't do our job, or, this isn't for everybody. But I think it's softened that atmosphere to the point where if something's messed up and we need to get it off our chest, people are more willing and active to be active and, I guess, participatory listeners in that aspect.
What about you? Do you have any particular PTSD symptoms? How do you deal with them?
Yeah, so my story in particular was a little strange, and I guess the suck it up mentality I do have experience with, but it was mostly internal within myself. I worked on this project for a year, and some days I'd spend 12 to 15 hours editing and listening to these stories over and over and over. And it became kind of a dark place for me for a while. I was, locked in my editing room and working on this. And, after a while, I was like, wow, it really started to kind of rub off on me, the darkness, hearing these stories over and over. And then right when I started working on it pretty heavily, I had an extremely traumatic call that I kind of had to put to the side and didn't really give it the attention that it deserved. And I didn't really take into account my own mental health and pushed it off to the side a lot. I had this kind of notion that, well, maybe people would perceive, oh, this guy just did a big documentary on PTSD and now he's having PTSD as well. I think I always had things that bothered me. I just didn't really understand that I was in that category of how much they were affecting me as well. So while I was working on it, this was last February, I was a new paramedic, still a new paramedic, and went to a breach delivery call. Ended up being second on the scene, and it was a very hard to reach area of an apartment complex. Female in the back, second floor, on all fours with, about half of the body of the baby had already been delivered. We couldn't reach the umbilical and we were just stuck. Baby wouldn't come out. And we tried repositioning for several times, and this quickly turned into a near panic situation where we knew if we didn't get this baby out, the baby was going to come out dead. And it turned it into about a 15-minute ordeal of trying to extricate her out of the apartment. And then when we finally came up with a plan on how to get her out in the position that she was in, baby came out dead. We worked the kid immediately. So we went from a pretty traumatic breech delivery to a newborn CPR code that lasted approximately 30 minutes where we lost pulses. We got pulses back. We ended up, we worked as hard as we possibly could to save this kid and got the baby there alive after losing pulses 2 more times, rode up on the gurney, keeping a finger on the brachial artery and keeping an eye on the monitor the whole time, just ready for, the baby to lose pulses again. And we felt pretty accomplished when we dropped the kid off. And then, come to find out, days later that there wasn't an octic brain injury and the kid never made it. We never got briefed on that either. We were kind of left wondering like, well, I hope the kid made it. And some people were able to, just go on about their lives, not really worrying too much or wondering too much. And for me, I was personally invested immediately. I wanted to know if the kid made it. I wanted to know if our efforts made a difference. I wanted to know the outcome. It was just important to me. I cared. And maybe I cared a little too much because, when I found out that the kid didn't make it, that's when all the guilt started, anything that could have gone wrong on this call would have gone wrong. I had to go with an IO needle in one of the baby's legs and took the packaging out, drilled into the into the baby's leg and went to untwist the iode needle and realized quickly that I couldn't untwist the needle. And then it just threw me for a loop and I didn't know what was wrong. And quickly I realized that this was a defective iode needle, that there was no hollow bore in it. It was completely solid and there was no twistable part on the piece. And it just completely baffled me at the time. And I said, I don't know what's wrong with this. Tell me what's wrong with this. And then someone else came to untwist it and they said, what's going on? And then quickly realized, like, wow, this is a defective piece of equipment. And so we had to drill into the other leg. And then we lost the tube, extricating the baby down the stairs. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And I think a lot of us blamed ourselves for the outcome. We did a debriefing afterwards.
So you said that you had essentially blamed yourself, even though it wasn't really your fault objectively. So how did you get through that?
Well, I did a lot of ignoring. I did a lot of, just trying to stay busy, kept injecting myself into the film every chance I got. And really just tried to stay busy. But the thing I was staying busy on was very dark material. It's all talking about things that I myself was dealing with. And, for me personally, I kind of just shoved it down deep and just kept working on the film. And then by the time the film was over, everything just kind of piled on to me. I started realizing, like, I don't really know how to function right now because this is still bothering me. I still blame myself for not being on top of my game or not noticing things quicker. This was such a dynamic scene where we had literally 5 paramedics and I was the newest one on the scene. And even though some might say, well, or new, this is part of learning, that wasn't acceptable to me. I thought that I should have been able to catch things that I didn't, when in reality, there really wasn't much I could have done differently. It was just the way the situation unfolded, and we responded to it in the best way we knew how. And I think the big turning point for me, once I got into counseling and started seeing somebody, it started opening up to how I blamed myself. They said, well, what did you do when that didn't work? And I said, well, I grabbed another one and I did that. And they said, well, you did the next best thing. And I thought about that long and hard, and it's like, you're right. I did do that. It wasn't like I did nothing and saw everything falling apart and said, oh my gosh, this is just terrible, but didn't do anything. I did everything I could to save that kid and did everything I could to, be the best medic I could. And certain things, have always bothered me, especially when it has to do with family members and showing up on a call and somebody's dead and we have to work a CPR for 40 minutes and then you have to break that news to them that, we did all we could, but they're not coming back, and watching those family members handle that has always bothered me ever since I've been on this job. And I don't know if it'll ever go away. I think that's just part of the way this job goes, but at least I understand the aspect of which bothers me the most so that I can better prepare for it, I think, in the future. And it's done wonders for me, especially getting into mental health counseling. I got to a point where things were not going well for me. They weren't going well at home. They weren't going well in my relationship. I was completely depressed and didn't want to be around people. And it wasn't a good place to be. And my fiance at the time told me that you're just not yourself. I think you need to take some time and, get into some counseling and get yourself right. I heard her out and, that's what I did. I took the time off. And
how did you react to that initially? Did you agree with her right away or did you have to look at it for a while?
I didn't argue with her. I was very silent and I started feeling really overwhelmed with emotions because I knew she was right. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how to solve it. And like I said, I felt the guilt of not wanting to put this documentary out there for everybody to see. And then I guess I was worried about the perception of how it would look if I immediately was like, okay, I need time off. I'm not dealing with things right. But in reality, that's just the way it is, you know. You can't operate through life, you know, when things bother you, always worrying about how other people feel about it. And you can't base those decisions off of how other people feel about it, regardless of how they feel. You know, I didn't even know. And when I took the time off, I ended up taking about 2 months off and did 3 different types of therapies once a week, and ended up, you know, going on an antidepressant. And things started opening up for me, and things started being more clear. And before I knew it, I was happy to go back to work. You know, when I took the time off, I didn't want to be there. There was a time where I didn't even know if I wanted to continue doing this job, just because everything I didn't see an escape. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't see anything that was, you know, showing me that I could do this for another 20 years.
Wow.
And it scared me, because this is all I've wanted to do. You know, I grew up in a firefighting family. I was around the fire service since I can remember. And it's all I've ever wanted to do. And here I am, and I finally made it here. It took me 5 years to get the job. And here I am going, maybe this isn't for me. And, you know, I think that's okay. And some people do need to come to that need to ask themselves that question. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that question either. And it doesn't make us weaker. You know, sometimes people just take things too personally, and they can't leave it at the station when they go home. And that's what I was doing. I was bringing all that home and not really opening up to my fiance about it, and, you know, telling her how much it was bothering me until it was a little too late. And then once I finally did, I realized, man, I should have done this a lot sooner. And she was so supportive of it, and, you know, allowed me the time to get right, you know, and now things are much better. And, you know, we're about to get married now, and our relationship's never been stronger. And, you know, it really just showed me the value of communication and vulnerability, and especially in a relationship.
Congratulations on all that. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
This film has been available for about 6 months now. Is that right?
We've released it on YouTube at the end of October. You know, we initially rented out a local theater here in Tacoma, and for, I think, 4 nights, we allowed our members to bring their families to see the film in a theater setting. And the response we got was phenomenal. A lot of people opened up about a lot of things, and a lot of unlikely characters too. A lot of people that had never opened up about things started opening up. And then once we went live on YouTube, it started gaining some national notoriety, which was fantastic.
What kind of feedback have you gotten nationally?
I've been reached out to by firefighters all over the world, commenting the video, and, you know, saying that the best comments that I've gotten are people that have struggled themselves and say, you know what, this is what I needed to hear, and this actually like prompted me to get some help of my own, and now I feel much better. I mean, it's hard to not feel really good to hear that.
That's fantastic. Film is beautifully shot and edited. It's titled The Call We Carry, Confronting PTSD in the Fire Service. It is available for free on YouTube. And Cody Shea, thanks for talking with me today on Code 3.
Thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate it.
And there's more about The Call We Carry, including the link to view it, on our website at code3podcast.com/documentary. If you haven't seen it, you may want to watch it with your whole house one evening. Take a look, let me know what you think. Now, if you find the information on Code 3 to be valuable to your professional development, you can return that value by giving any dollar amount to keep this show going. $10 a month in particular gives you access to the Code 3 Bull Sessions, where we post occasional extra material that didn't make the main show. Just head over to code3podcast.com/support to make your pledge. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of Code 3. Thank you for listening. I'll be back next time with more, and I hope you'll join me. I'm Scott Orr, and until then, stay safe.
To contact us, get more information on today's show, or to subscribe to the podcast, go to code3podcast.com.